Hello, Melissa Brown.
Hi, Charlie.
You're on the regenerative journey, and we are sitting on welcome to your veranda. Did you call it a patio or veranda?
I call it a deck.
It's a deck.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what you call it. South Australians might call them decks. If it wasn't actually timber, you'd have to call it what? A concrete.
Yeah, maybe.
So we're looking at we're on your deck at your house.
Yes.
And we're looking out. And what I do is I interview my guests in their happy place. You know, in a place that is, and this is a pretty happy place because what we're looking at is some of your vines, and there's a bit of a flow line there, riparian zone, a creek, just through there, and we've got birds chirping, and I heard some lambs barring and ewes barring this morning.
Yeah, they're in the vineyard over there.
But oh yeah, right. And down here because they sound like they were down here.
Yeah.
You can't see them because they're sort of hidden.
Hopefully eating all the weeds.
We'll get to that. I want to know more about that. That's really cool. So if you don't know, I haven't heard of Melissa Brown and Gem Tree Wines, and how dare you? How rude of our listeners got to. So Melissa, we're here and we're having a lovely time. I want you just to start by telling me, our listeners, what it means to you to be sitting here looking at that beautiful part of the world.
Oh,
is it nice?
It's great. It feels like I definitely belong here. So this was my parents' home, and I was very lucky that about 10 years ago they decided to move, and they let Mike and I move in here. We actually got married on this deck. Cool. Back in 2000, and back then I never even dreamed that I would end up living here. So I feel very fortunate, and I think living on the property that we farm, it's definitely given not only me a stronger connection, but it's giving our children a connection to this land, which we didn't have before we lived here. So yeah.
And do you want to explain what's going on out there in front of us, where we are?
Sure. So we are in McLaren Flat, which is a little village, part of the McLaren Vale region, just east of McLaren Vale. We're sitting at the base of the Mount Lofty Ranges. So it's we're surrounded by hills and trees. A bit further west, we've got the St Vincent's Gulf, so we're on the Fleurieu Peninsula here. We've got some absolutely beautiful coastline and beaches here. I just love living where I do because I feel like I've got the best of everything. Beautiful beaches, space, fresh air, beautiful nature, and we're 45 minutes from a capital city. Being
Adelaide?
Yes.
Which you were there last night, hosting a dinner.
Correct. Yes.
Tell us why.
Well, that was for Tasting Australia, which is a fantastic event run here in South Australia, and all sorts of events are going on during Tasting Australia. Obviously, the focus is food, but a lot on wine as well. And Mike and I are actually attending an event ourselves this afternoon, going to a masterclass of Cullen wines, which I'm very excited about.
Cullen from WA.
Correct.
Who are also
Biodynamic, and her wines are amazing.
They certainly are.
Yeah.
So let's we'll set the scene somewhat. It is beautiful here. It's funny when you turn up somewhere. I arrived the other night for dinner, thank you very much, and it was dark, so really didn't know where I was. And then to be sitting here now with all this beautiful landscape exposed in the sunlight is just wonderful, and it is a magic place. Melissa, I want to dig into your journey, your regenerative journey. Where do you want to start?
Oh, well, probably not, when I was born.
You might want to. Are you born around here?
No, I was born in Adelaide.
Adelaide,
yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. In a hospital.
Yeah.
Well, you might have been born at, home.
No, I wasn't. My grandfather, he was a market gardener in Marion, and his his father was a market gardener in Cherry Gardens. So my grandfather, when urbanisation was sort of increasing around Marion in the 1960s, he decided to come down here, and he planted a vineyard in the year I was born, actually, which I kind of feel is reasonably significant. So he continued to do his market gardening, but yeah, he started the whole vineyard thing. And then my parents, they came down here in the 80s, and my grandfather, taught my dad, and mum and dad, they started with sort of a 30-acre vineyard. They were very hardworking and became quite successful, and they just gradually kept buying more vineyards and more land to plant. And then I joined our family business in the 90s. And it was around that time that I met Mike. So we were principally grape growers, and very conventional grape growers too. And then when I met Mike, I brought a winemaker into the family. Probably one of the best things.
You had to marry him.
Well, yeah. My dad will tell you one of the best things I've ever done, because he loves drinking our wine now.
Hopefully for not that reason alone.
Yeah. So, and then we decided to, Mike and I decided to have a crack at making our own wine. So we started with 500 cases in 1998, and that is when the Gemtree brand was born.
Why Gemtree? Where is that?
So that's the name of this beautiful property where we're sitting. So this property was actually owned by a group of investors, and my dad planted it for them. So they contracted him to run it, and it started as 100 acres. So they called it Gemtree.
Okay.
And then anyway, they went broke, and Dad went along to the auction and didn't really have the money, but stuck his hand up and bought it. So
because he knew how to run it, pretty much, did he?
Well, yeah, I think he obviously thought it was a pretty good bet, and it was quite risky back then. It was sort of early 90s, and the industry was not wasn't cranking. Yeah,
wasn't developed. Yeah. And how many acres have you got now?
We've got just over 300. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so what happened? You and Mike took over. What happened next?
Well,
made the first.
Yeah, so we made
batch.
The first wine.
The first vintage.
Which,
that's what you
yeah,
say,
and
not batch.
My dad sort of said, "Well, you don't make too much, because if you can't sell it, we're going to have to drink it all." But we did sell it. So so look, we gradually the wine brand started very small and very slowly grew. But I think probably significantly, I started playing around with organics around 2005, and that came from I had a personal experience where I attended a health retreat on Kangaroo Island, and I completely changed my whole viewpoint on the way I was living my life, and it gave me a real focus and sense of purpose, and I became a big advocate for organic from that experience. And so I started playing around with organics here in the vineyard, and then Mike attended a workshop in the Barossa. It was a Shiraz Alliance, and he went to a little tasting of biodynamic wines and came back and said to me, "Wow, those wines were incredible. Would you consider having a look at biodynamics?" And I went, "Sure." So that's sort of how we got into it.
And you went to the retreat just because you wanted a new way of doing things, or
I was a bit unwell, and so it was. I've always suffered from migraines, so that was sort of the why I went. I actually I've been back to that retreat 6 times. So the lady who runs it, she became sort of a bit like my guru, I suppose.
Can we tell people her name?
Yeah, so it's Kangaroo Island Health Retreat, and her name is Sue McCarthy. I've sent lots of people to her over the years, she's a real force in herself. and I've learned a lot from her, and she's had a significant impact on my life.
And a wonderful catalyst for change, and then the journey on it went.
Definitely, and I think things are all about timing. You know, like when I was growing up, I hated the vineyard. I wasn't interested in nature or anything at all like that, and I never ever thought I would end up running my dad's vineyards. But when in '94 I came back from overseas, I was at a bit of a crossroads, and I sort of said to my dad, I need a job, you know, broke. Can I come and work in the vineyard? He said, sure, you won't last 2 weeks because you're too soft. Well, yeah,
Dad.
that was 23 years ago. So, but what I hadn't realised about myself prior to then was that how much I love nature and how much I love being in nature, and I think the time was just right. Then when I made that decision to work in the vineyard, the timing was perfect for me to discover that about myself. So yeah, I mean, I didn't do any science subjects at school because I didn't think I was smart enough, or you know, I didn't have that belief in myself, and it's I'm still amazed that I ended up doing a science degree, and I actually, you know, have a degree in science. It's incredible. Yeah.
Do you know why that might have been, that you just didn't feel a connection? Was it I don't know, was there something that was said or happened, or just didn't resonate at the time?
I didn't realise it about myself, you know. And I mean, life's a journey, and you know, I think it's just full of different discoveries, and I discovered that about myself, and I'm so glad. And now I know that, you know, when I get a bit stressed and when things really start to get a bit out of control, I know I need to go out in nature and just reground myself.
How do you do that?
Look, I try and find a short holiday. I go to Kangaroo Island a fair bit. I love it there. The landscape and the nature there is just absolutely stunning. You know, the beach. I love the beaches around here. It could be as simple as after a big day at work, just walking out here and taking off your shoes and walking on the grass. You know, just reconnect to nature and be in a garden or in a beautiful natural setting, and I feel like that's where I'm meant to be.
And you only have to walk a couple of more metres from your garden and you're in the vineyard.
Yes, yeah, and I walk around the vineyard a lot too, because that's, as I said, this I feel like I belong here.
It's a kind of interesting thing, isn't it, that vineyards are straight, you know, not everything's straight, but you know, lots of infrastructure, lots of straight lines.
Very military.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is in a way. It has to be for a number of reasons, and it's dare I say, a monoculture of that. However, the sense I get, and the sense I get from, you know, I guess growers who are, dare I say, doing the right thing, whatever that means, you know, it's not just a monoculture. There's more to it, isn't there? There's what's happening inter row. There's the bird life. You've got sheep in your vineyard. Like,
yes.
It's not like the monoculture in the true sense of the word. There's actually like the integration of, we have got a commercial crop here, but it's permanent, obviously, perennial, and you are doing some pretty cool things to still maintain and enhance biodiversity. You know.
Absolutely, yeah, and there's plenty of benefits that have come from that, and it is quite a big focus of what I do. I do believe biodiversity is important to create an ecosystem that is in balance, and we have less pest and disease problems here now than when we were running the vineyards conventionally, and I think there's a number of reasons for that.
We'll get to that. Let's jump back a bit so Mike came back and said, I reckon we should give this a crack. What was the next step?
So we trialled it on a block of Tempranillo. My dad was pretty against it.
Did you say you told him?
He thought we were going to send him into financial ruin. And I said, well, just let us trial it and see how we go. And
so he was worried about yield and sort of
Yeah,
that's gonna be a
definitely.
waste of that crop or that block or that whatever.
yeah. My dad was pretty traditional in his views, and also Dad really liked the vineyard to look good. So he would always want it to be, mowed in between the vines and have no life under vine. So it all had to be a bare strip under vine.
So there was tillage.
Yeah, tillage and a very heavy chemical regime. So
For weeds.
so pre-emergent herbicides, a lot of chemical fertilisers, a lot of superphosphate that we used to put out with the cover crops and things like that. So it was a pretty intensive input regime here.
So you're doing you're kicking it off. You're experimenting. He's spewing.
Yeah.
What's going to happen?
Oh, a few arguments, but I mean, we used to argue a lot about the vineyards.
Still.
Not now.
No.
We've got to a good spot now. But yeah, there was. We didn't agree on a lot of things. Yeah. So, but look, Mike was backing me up.
He's a big bloke too, so he wouldn't.
He is, yeah. And my dad's a little bloke.
Go, oh, okay, you do what you want.
I get my height from my dad, Charlie. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah. Look.
What did you do? Did you fence it off, or you just said that this area here is we're going to put some preparations out?
Yeah, we did. And once you take away the herbicide, herbicide I think does a lot of damage to the soil health. And once you take that away, it's a really good start to repairing the soil and letting some life come back into it. But there was another winery here in McLaren Vale that were already biodynamic, and that was Paxton Wines.
Yeah.
And my dad is a good friend of David Paxton, and so I think that helped me get it across the line with Dad, because I was able to say to him, well, Paxton wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't a good thing. And
some other weirdo doing it too.
Well, it helped. I've got a lot to thank David Paxton for. So yeah.
No, and I don't mean that facetiously. It's just that's I have when I changed what I was doing, what I did was I sort of identified to Dad people and introduced him to people who were not dissimilar in age to him and sort of background, and I think that helped, because he was going, oh, okay, well, maybe my son's not that so silly that if these guys are doing it, then that's sort of kind of gives him comfort.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you put, what did you do? What was your first thing? You went and got some 500 or?
Yeah. Yep. So started putting out the preps, and I mean, we had the 1 year trial, and then we somehow managed to let Dad, he let us go across this whole property here. So put out preps pretty intensively in those first few years. So we were putting out 4 preps a year, and a lot of experimentation with weed control. Really, that's the biggest thing when you convert to organic or biodynamic, is getting your head around that weed management. And I think that's what stops a lot of people from converting, because it's a real leap of faith and a complete change in the way that you're doing things.
So what did you? So previously, maybe mainly herbicide control, and then you what did you do?
Well, so we had a Dodge plough. So we were using that, and then the sheep, they were pretty significant. But that required a fair bit of capital investment with fencing around the place.
Sure.
So the sheep are fantastic. While the vines are from sort of post-harvest through to bud burst, they do an amazing job, and they became a very big part of what we do here, and that they still are today.
And I think it's important to note that animals whether it's in a vineyard or it's in a horticultural situation, certainly in grazing, because that's just what they do. That's part of the without the sheep or cattle, there is no grazing. In a pastoral situation, the cycling of fertility as an animal in an environment, you know, poo and wee,
Exactly.
and it's fresh. You know, yes, there's a lot to be said for composting, and that's hopefully made with some other manures and things. But,
Yes.
but having that fresh, the biology of this land, going back out on that land, having been through an animal, and fermentation and rumination and lots of energy put into that manure, even sheep. That's a really positive thing.
Spot on. Yeah. And there are some people who will say that, having sheep is causing compaction on your land, but I would argue that the tractors are probably doing a bit more damage in that respect than having sheep.
What do you do with them when they're not running around in the sort of cooler times of the year?
So we have to have paddocks where we can put them in during the growing season, but we've only got about 100 of our own sheep, which our vineyard manager Troy, he owns the sheep, and we have an arrangement with a farmer sort of in the southeast, and he brings his sheep in here. They have to quarantine, and then they're here over winter. So it's a win-win, because his paddocks get a spell. He comes down with ewes that are about to lamb, or we might get lambs as well.
No lamb here.
Yeah.
Cool.
So his paddocks get a spell. They come down here, eat all of our weeds. He gets fat lambs back, and no money changes hands.
Do you whip a few into the freezer while they're here?
I wouldn't do that. No.
No one's going to hear this.
No. Well, see, we have Troy's sheep for that, so yeah.
Just Troy know about that.
Yeah, well, he usually does it, Charlie. So yeah.
So how many hundreds do you end up sort of having to roam around the vineyard?
Yeah, it's quite a few, about 400.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, that's probably really small, compared to
No,
a sheep
but
farmer,
you're 300 acres, so that's I mean, and it's whatever you need to do to get the outcomes you want.
Well, and what we've found is that we have to put them into this cell grazing sort of scenario where they have to go into smaller areas to do an effective job.
Totally.
Yeah, so that might mean running a bit of a fence down a vine row to.
Temporary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
What do you use like Kiwi Tech fencing, or what sort of fence do you put up?
Just
Couple
they're pretry rudimentary fencing.
Hot wire?
I'm really bad at closing the gates properly. Anyway.
That's not it. So are they hot wire? Are they, as in they electrified?
No, they're
They're
not.
like a netting fence, are they?
Yeah, it's just the sort of cyclone fencing, or we just use wire and
Oh, cool. I'd love to have a look at what you do, because
Sure.
there may or may not be, I don't know, I'm no expert in running sheep in vineyards. There might be ways to be able to run fences out that are more simple and as effective. That's the way they lay.
We have tried cows too in the past, but that was not successful.
Because?
Oh, they do a bit of damage, like they're sort of chewing on irrigation lines and, getting into valves and things like that. Yeah.
No, they can be troublesome.
And then they'd kind of get out and you'd find one down on the road. And
not good.
No.
Better if you're going to hit something on the road, better to be a sheep than a cow.
Probably.
Purely from an endurance point of view. So tell me, for lots of preparations, that's generally your regime now still?
No, so we put 2 biodynamic sprays out a year. We just do a spring and an autumn spray now.
And what is that? What's in that preparation?
500 and the cowpat pit.
Yeah, cool.
And 501. And that's pretty much it.
And so for those who don't know yet, because you're about to find out, the 500 and the cow manure concentrate or cowpat pit is a soil preparation. So that's really for the
that's right.
the soil
Yes.
sort of activity.
Yep. So it's stimulating all the microbes in the soil. They sort of start feeding, and then that creates humus and. It just gets all that activity happening in the soil, and then you have nutrients are released to the plant, and so you've just that's how it should be, I think. It's
And
all very natural.
Yes, totally. And the 501 is silica, corn silica.
Yep.
How do you use that in your thing? Because I think that's for a lot of people, and especially for grape growers, I think a really important tool that one can use.
Absolutely. Well, so I always describe, the 500 is all about what's happening below the ground. The 501 is sort of what's happening above the ground. It's more about encouraging photosynthesis, sap flow, sugar accumulation. It can assist in ripening. It helps strengthen the plant against any fungal diseases. So and if you're putting out 500, you should put out 501 as well. Otherwise, you're creating an imbalance. The 501 is just as important as the 500.
Excuse me. So the 501's going out on a sort of a scheduled way. Is it more like, I think we need to put a bit of truth. Get out this week. What's your sort of regime with it?
Yeah. So we do our autumn. As I said, our autumn spray and our spring spray. We spray the 500 when the moon is descending, and the 501 when the moon is ascending, and it generally happens in the same month. So that's how we do it.
And you're using it specifically for any like downy mildew or any mildew types?
I haven't. In 2017, we had a very wet vintage here, and we had big crops too. So about around January of that year, I did put out a 501 on its own because I felt like it was going to help with that ripening process. What I didn't do was leave the patch unsprayed, so I didn't have a trial patch to compare against, but all of our crops successfully ripened, and we didn't have any disease issues that year, which was a very wet year. So
when others may have had, it was a disease. Year.
2011 was actually a really bad year for disease, and we were pretty early on in our journey. We didn't lose any crops other than a small acreage. We had 4 acres of Sangiovese, and we did lose that crop that year, but the rest of it we got through.
And tell me, that's become a cornerstone of your practice here at the farm since then?
Totally. It is the philosophy that we have of running these vineyards. It's all about keeping it as natural as possible, enlivening the soil, which you then gives you healthy vines, and biodiversity, and it is the focus of what we do, and then other things have come from that. So we're really conscious about any decisions that we make, how we can lessen the detrimental impact on the environment. It's become a very strong focus of our business to be to try and help the environment and to nurture this land, and it's really important.
And what are some of the other things you're doing that sort of aren't necessarily grape related directly that you're doing to nurture the land?
Well, it's the biodiversity, so we've got an area in the vineyard called, it's right sort of in the middle of our vineyards, it's called the Gem Tree Eco Trail. And it's a 25-acre piece of land that we have. It was degraded, so when Mum and Dad bought that piece of land, it was the only vegetation on it was some beautiful big gum trees, and we set aside an area to revegetate, and we've planted over 50,000 native trees and shrubs in this area, and we've also put in a walking trail through there. It's just a short 1 kilometre trail. We've got informational signs in there teaching people about the environment. That area has, that is a perfect example of biodiversity. It's become an important corridor for native animals, and it's just a really fantastic space, and something that is quite unique to Gemtree and that we're quite proud of.
Well, you should be proud of it too, because you took us a quick spin there the other day. It was wonderful. It was we turned up to the car park, a couple of kangaroos just in the car park, already parked them, so that your dog was going nuts trying to round them up, or trying to. You've got some emus there. You've got a little spot where people. There's an organisation that you work with that the Koala sort of rescue sort of a little spot.
Yeah.
So they get to hang out in a really cool.
We sponsor Southern Koala Rescue, so a couple, Mission Wade, they do a huge amount of work rescuing injured koalas around here, and I love the work that they do, and I really admire what they do, and I asked them if they needed an area for to put koalas, and they said yep. So we set up just a little fenced area where they put an injured koala in there, and it's left there to get used to being back out in the wild. We have to provide food and water for the koala, and then when they're happy for it, that when they think it's ready, it'll then get released back into the wild.
You can chin up this big tree there and have like a pretty normal kind of hangout hospital time.
It's
awesome.
Gets fed 3 different species of eucalypt every couple of days, and fresh water, and they never want to leave. That's the thing, when they open the doors, sometimes it takes them 3 days to go, because they're like, why would I go?
They've been at the resort for ages.
That's it.
And it's free. Like you have that, people just turn up and park and wander around.
Yes.
Which is really cool.
Yeah. And there's a playground in there. There's a barbecue that people can use. So it is a great space for families to use, the local community. A lot of people used to walk their dogs in there and weren't terribly happy when we said, no, sorry, because of the native animals, better keep them out. But and it's just a really great place to go and be amongst nature.
We've been here for a couple of days now. This is the second day of our 2-day biodynamic introduction to biodynamics that Hamish and I run. So we're really very pleased and grateful that you're hosting that for us, and it's really cool because we're in one of your sheds, and your what do you call that part of your depot there? What is it called? Is it the winery? The winery? No.
Yeah.
Where are we? It is the winery.
Yeah.
And we're in this big shed with the.
We are
eggs.
hosting the workshop in Narnia.
In Narnia?
Yeah.
Because of why?
Well, we called it Narnia because there used to be a door that you would sort of have to go through to get to that little area.
Is that the one that's dead? It's sort of been.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sure.
So it's like what's behind the door.
What's behind the door?
Yeah. So cool. That's.
And there's big black eggs, concrete
eggs. Yeah.
Is that a secret? Are we in the inner sanctum there?
No, it is.
If I taste that wine, will I just be magical or something?
You don't need to, Charlie.
Does that do? I need help. It's really cool.
Yeah, it is, and that's a fairly new addition to what we're doing. Those eggs are very expensive, it's the eggs are a great way of infusing more creativity into wines, I think, and just giving them that little bit of oomph that you don't get from a square fermenter.
And also not in. So if they're in concrete, they're not in oak.
Correct.
They're not getting sort of oak tones.
Yeah, that's right. And it's also the shape of the egg that has an impact, because the wine is constantly sort of moving. So as opposed to a flat bottom or a correct. So in a barrel, the wine just sort of sits on the lees. Whereas in the egg, there is this slow movement happening all the time. So it's constantly mixed. The solids are sort of mixing. Yeah. So that's what imparts a slightly different flavour.
And tell me, Melissa, what for those grape growers listening, what are some of the, I don't know, the things that you might be able to tips and tricks or bits of wisdom you can impart that you've learned, from your learnings or your sort of, your time, not just as a grape grower, but, maybe more as a biodynamic grape grower? What are some of the things that might instill confidence, inspiration?
Well, look, I mean, I think when we first converted to this regime, there was a bit of cynicism around it.
Internally, externally?
Externally. And it was also internally, it was convincing our team members that this was a good thing to do as well. As I said before, I think weeds are a big stumbling block for people to get over in terms of going organic. And I mean, here in McLaren Vale, we have the perfect climate for organic farming. We don't generally get frost. We don't get a lot of sort of rainfall in summer. We can get a fair bit of rainfall in spring, but not always. So very different to the Hunter Valley, for example, where it's quite humid and they can get high rainfall around harvest. So it's pretty easy to be organic here. But I think, if someone says to me, well, what are the benefits of going organic and biodynamic, it would be because it's your soil health. The soils, you're not putting herbicides and artificial inputs into the soil, which for me, I'm dealing with nature. My job is working with nature, and the more that you work with it than against it, or the more things that you introduce to try and influence it, I just don't. It just doesn't feel right. That whole system should work naturally, and it can. I think we've successfully shown that it does work and that it is possible. Yeah, but you have to have that belief and make that leap of faith to say, right, this is what I'm doing now. And I'm not, there are a few people out there that might say, oh yes, well, we use organic practices, but they're not certified, or they're not quite prepared to take that final step.
Commit. Because
they want to have that fallback position.
So when you say that, they might be sort of, and they do some organic practices, but still throwing a bit of herbicide around, or sort of.
Well, yeah, or they might think that, it's just
have sheep that use herbicide too, or something. Yeah, sort of
just in case.
And I guess there's something. Everyone needs to go at their own speed to this sort of thing. But at the end of the day, I think you're right. I definitely believe you're right. That there is a point at which you do have to just commit or jump off that thing, and there is a degree of trust, isn't there?
Definitely.
Sort of hone your skills and get a bit more comfortable with it. But
that's right. Yeah, and look, I've been very fortunate. So I've worked. I've got quite a few people on my team that have been with me for a long time. In particular, our vineyard manager Troy, who we've been working together for 19 years. So he was, here when we were running these vineyards conventionally. And then when I said, okay, we're going to go biodynamic, he was like, whoa, how are we going to do that? But he's just come on the journey with us, and he's very talented at a lot of things, and he's sort of modified equipment and really good at problem solving, and so it's great having somebody in your team who's really supportive of what you're doing and prepared to face those challenges. And so I've been very fortunate to have people around me that are supportive. And one thing we've realised is that now when we employ people here at Gemtree, we're looking for like-minded individuals. So, we no point somebody coming and working at Gemtree if they don't believe in our philosophy and the way that we're running our business. It's not going to work.
And you've put half a dozen more of your employees or staff through our course at the moment, which is wonderful. Yeah,
well, it's important that the whole team understands what we do, why we do, even if they're working, in admin. And also we run tours at our cellar door teaching people about biodynamics. So if we're doing that, we need to know what we're talking about. You know, like those the team up there, they're pretty passionate about it as well, so everybody in our business understands biodynamics.
And I mean, knowing you as much as I know of you and Mike and the family, you know, I'm not surprised you're attracting good people. You know, the fact that you know, and then they're staying. Troy, you transitioned. I've no doubt that Troy is you know, his type of personality is obviously one that's open-minded and trusting, but at the same time, you know, you and Mike are able to hold his hand through that and work in a very, you know, close way to get that happen. So
definitely,
you know,
collaboratively, and we're not the sort of business owners or bosses, I suppose, that say, right, you will do this. We recognise that we're going to get the best result by having input from all the team members about, you know, what might work, what doesn't, and getting them to introduce ideas and solutions.
Feeling like they've got some ownership of it.
Exactly, yeah.
Just jumping back to your cellar door, you gave Hamish and I a tour of your wonderful, it's basically your biodynamic sort of prep making and demonstration area. It's awesome. Can you take us through that? Because I've never seen that before. It's really cool.
Yeah, I was a bit nervous showing Hamish around because, you know, Hamish, I learnt a lot from Hamish, and but he liked it, so that's good. I got a tick. I was happy about that.
He loved it. Tell us about it, because we haven't seen it before.
So it's an area that we've established, an interactive area to show people and explain to people how biodynamics works, because we found that trying to talk across a bar about the philosophy, it's very difficult to communicate the message properly. So we wanted to set up a little area where people can look at the sort of, you know, herbs that are used by growing them in the gardens, have examples of the preparations. They can see them, they can smell them, they can touch them. We've got the flow form there so they can see that in operation, and just talking people through it. And we even finish off the tour by just a little quick walk out to the vineyard, and so people are immersed in it a bit more. And most people who have done the tour, well, actually I think everybody who's done the tour has really enjoyed it and come away a lot more educated and with a lot more knowledge about biodynamics.
And it also puts the wine into context, doesn't it? Like, you guys are, you know, the wine is an expression of the soil and the parental material. And that's one thing. The grape is produced. You're using these biodynamics to sort of get it to that stage, and people can understand it. A bit of work goes into it, doesn't it? I mean, when I say work, it's like there's as much intent, as much about the attitude.
That is absolutely the intent, and that, you know, that's why it's important that our team understand. Like, you know, there's no point in me saying to someone, oh, well, you go and put out that biodynamic spray, if they don't understand what they're doing, because the philosophy, you do have to have that intent, that good intent, in order for it to work. So there is a bit of spirituality, and that sort of, it's not mainstream, clear-cut science. Yeah. It's not
get your spray regime or your inputs from your agronomist and sort of bang it out, and just being a prescriptive type of thing. Any other tips or, you know, I don't know, things that you can impart to our listeners and our other grape growers?
Look, I think I just feel like there is so much going wrong on our planet, you know, and I think that we all have a responsibility to try and do something, and if everybody does something and changes their practices in some way to help the environment, then collectively we can help to repair and make things better, and so that is kind of what what drives me, because I'm really concerned for the future of our planet. And so what we're doing here is trying to set an example of how you can run a business successfully and do it while looking after the environment. So yeah, that would be my message.
That sort of a theme came up the other Wednesday. I did a lunch at our Kina wine estate in the Barossa, and it was a Tasting Australia event. And our question was sort of that, you know, what are you, the climate crisis? What can we do? And I just said, well, as a farmer, we shouldn't think we need to save the planet, because that's a big job. But what we can do, and often people will go, oh, that's too hard, I'm not going to bother, and I'm just going to sit here being anxious and pained by it, which in itself is kind of weird. But I
know what you mean, though.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So I thought, well, you know, let's, as farmers or managers of landscape, just focus on what we're in control of and the boundary of our farms and what's going on there, and understanding the function of that landscape and doing things, whether it's biodynamics or natural sequence farming, or I don't know, some managed grazing or planting trees or God knows what, bird habitat sort of
even
focus.
You know, take your keep cup to the coffee shop.
Yes. When you head into town for smoking.
Yeah, just the little things. Everything's going to have an impact,
and keep it simple, and keep it sort of within your
capacity.
Yeah.
And I think David Attenborough summed it up really well when he said, if we take care of nature, nature will take care of us.
Totally.
And that's, you know, there's a lot of wisdom in that statement.
And considering that nature is our most valuable, powerful business partner, because we're in business with nature.
Of course.
Really. At the end of the day, we have a commercial business operation
because ecology can't survive without the economy, and the economy can't survive without ecology. So, yeah.
Tell me, you sort of didn't touch on it, but anything you are irate about anything at the moment, Melissa? You're not a very irate kind of person,
I'm
but
not.
Is anything, any underlying that's just
it's just a concern. But what I am buoyed by there is a lot more focus on the environment and climate change now, and people are really starting to take notice. And I think, you know, even a couple of years ago there were people that said, well, it's not happening. It's not. I mean, it is an issue, and I think people are really realising that if we don't do something now, I mean, already there's a lot of damage that's been done, but yeah, I think governments around the world are starting to do stuff, so that's good. I mean, no point me sitting back and getting angry. What's that going to do? You know, it's like me worrying about the weather. I know, I used to worry a lot, and it's like, well, what's that going to do? I can't change, I can't do anything about it.
Well, let's flip that round. What are you excited about at the moment?
Oh, wow. Well, that movement of, you know, the engagement of people, and I think COVID has been a real reset too for a lot of people, of realising what's important, and just being grateful for small things. And I think there's been a lot more focus on the environment from COVID. So yeah, this just seems to be a big movement towards people living their lives more consciously.
And they all still need to eat food.
Well, that absolutely, and that is such a, you know, that's one of the things that really attracted me to the biodynamic philosophy, was that you know, Steiner said that we as farmers have a responsibility to nurture our community by growing produce that is full of nutritional value, which then feeds the brains of people within your community, and then everything is going to fall into place. And I think that's probably where there's been a lot of things going wrong in society, is because of the food that people eat, you know, not getting that nourishment that they need.
And that affects us, you know, mental, cognitive function, emotions, attitude,
Totally. Yeah.
perspective on life.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's kind of important, that food, isn't
Very. Yeah.
it? To eat it.
Well, and having the right framework to grow that food. So protecting our natural assets and making sure that we're nurturing them and not denigrating them.
Well, is there any projects that you're involved in, or you're sort of, again, excited about that sort of, you've got a bit of a focus on at the moment? Sort of, it could be sort of on farm or elsewhere.
Well, I'm part of the McLaren Vale Biodiversity Group. I'm on that committee, and they're a group of very hard-working, dynamic individuals, and our mission is to remove woody weeds from creek lines and replant with natives. And we do that by partnering with landholders and then engaging volunteers. We have a field day once a month for 2 hours, and we might get 50 to 60 volunteers come out and work on a property. And we're achieving some amazing results of removing these woody weeds. There's a lot of olives in our region that are a pest, and even things like, and there's other weeds, bone seed, and well, there's heaps of them, but trying to remove them and get the land back to what used to be there.
So those olives have sort of escaped, have they? Is that what
They have, and they're very, very difficult to control.
They just don't like dying.
They're hard to kill. Yeah. So we do a lot of drilling and filling.
Drilling as in, and you poison the poison.
Yeah.
But then when they're in the right place, it's pretty good that they don't want to die, isn't it?
Well, I've got a little olive grove.
I know. That down there
that my mum planted, and so.
You're experimenting with that. You said the other day you've chopped.
Yes, yeah. So we're going.
Just like they're just gone. There's like 2 foot, maybe a foot.
Yeah. So we've just chopped them off, and we're going to. This is Troy's idea to espalier. And then we can hopefully machine harvest them.
Yeah, awesome.
Because at the moment we hand harvest, which is quite labour intensive.
Can you shake them?
Yeah, you can.
You can.
Yeah.
But as they are now,
no, we can't fit a machine down the rows at the moment. So, so it's all done by hand and with a shaker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if you just chop the sides and left what's there in some sort of
but then you've still got to, put the tarps underneath and...
Yes.
Yeah. No, we have tried to do it with the machine unsuccessfully.
No, but actually chop them, espalier them as they are now without chopping them off at the
No, I don't. No,
wouldn't work.
That won't work. No, because you're sort of putting them on a trellis, effectively.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You could do 1 or 2 and see what happens.
Well, there's a lot of trial and error that goes on around here, Charlie. So yeah.
And I had mentoring. Who were some of your mentors in your world, or or more specifically the farm?
So I was fortunate enough to work with Pam Dunsford, who was the winemaker at Chapel Hill. I worked with her in the mid-90s. I used to work at the cellar door there, and Pam was I think she was actually the first female winemaker in South Australia. She she was the only female to go through Roseworthy amongst all these men back in the 60s.
And Roseworthy is
well, that was the big agricultural college here in South Australia.
And there was a viticulture course there.
Yeah.
Cool.
So and Pam was a very straight down the line, very talented winemaker, very successful, and she was running Chapel Hill. And I think there weren't a lot of females in viticulture back then, and it was great for me to work with somebody like Pam and see, she was a trailblazer in herself, and so she had a bit of an influence on me, because it's great to see, people who have done things outside the square and faced up to a challenge and been successful. So I was lucky enough to work with her. And the McLaren Vale community in itself is a very collaborative, encouraging community to be amongst. So even though we, all the wine businesses are kind of, compete with each other, we recognise that collaboratively we are going to achieve more for our region than if we're all trying to do it alone. And so there's a lot of information sharing that goes on of free will amongst growers, and we regularly have field days here where growers are invited out to everybody else's properties to have a look at what people are doing. You could say that all of those people are kind of mini mentors, because you can learn from everybody.
That's a wonderful thing, isn't it? It happens at Burrawa every few months. There's a grazing group there that sort of chuff around at different properties, and they travel reasonable distance, an hour or and a half too. It's quite a large area that sort of they roam around, and they've been to Hamino a couple of times over the last few years, and even in the days when we were conventional farming and there was a top croppers group, and we would do that. We turn up at a shearing shed and we talk about what we're doing, and it was the most amazing. I learned the most.
Well, that's where you do learn from, because it's all from experience. And if you haven't had that experience, somebody else has, and they can tell you about it.
Save you making a mistake or spending money you didn't need to.
Yeah, and you get more from that than I think from reading it from a book. Yeah.
Talk about reading books. Any that you, again, would recommend to people growing grapes, or I don't know, biodynamics or farming, or any sort of standouts for you?
Look, to be honest, I wish I had more time to read books. I listen to your podcast if I want to learn something, Charlie.
That's my next question.
No, what biodynamic book I read? Grass the Nettle by Peter Proctor.
Yeah, cool.
That was
That's
probably
one of the Bibles. Yeah.
To start with, and Maria Thun, her book, is very enlightening.
Yeah. They're both biodynamic practitioners. I think they're both passed away.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they certainly left a wonderful legacy. And Peter is a great doco, and I always get it wrong. It's one cow, one man, one planet. But it's those three things, but maybe around different order. Look it up, Google and YouTube it, or whatever you do, because it is a wonderful story, and it just really helps emphasise the power and the application of biodynamics, and a really wonderful man too. I love the way in it. Have you seen it?
No.
Oh, you'd love it. He'd say New Zealand Kiwi, and he leaves when he leaves his home in New Zealand to travel to India. Did a lot of work in India. Really paved the way for a lot of biodynamic, uptake in India. And he would sing to his house. He and his wife would sing to their house to thank them for having been there, and we're going away for a bit, and we're going to come back soon.
Fantastic.
It's beautiful, yeah. We do it, not a dissimilar thing at home, where we have a little gong and I set it up in front of the heater, and the heater's hydro something, the water gets piped around the house, so I'm thinking that the vibration gets gonged down through the rest of the house.
Amazing. And
just go bang, and just a nice couple of gratefuls for the shelter and the sanctuary that it provides. But no, and that was inspiration from that move from Peter doing that, and it's lovely. Lisa, I'm conscious of time. We're sort of in the middle of the day 2 of the
we are.
Biodynamic
I
intro.
wouldn't mind getting back there.
I know, and Hamish is talking about, because you're the host, he can give you some extra lessons, I'm sure, but we might wrap it up, and I can't tell you how grateful we are to be here, for your hospitality, your and Mike and the team's hospitality. Stoked that you've got some of your team members at the course, and just lovely to be sitting here in the McLaren Vale looking at the flock of galahs flying over there. Your compost is just down there too, we had a look at yesterday.
Yeah.
That was awesome, and just sitting here in this beautiful part of the world and having a chat with you, it's been awesome.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure for us to have you and Hamish here, so yeah, thank you.
We might come back.
I hope so.
Even if we don't get invited, we're just going to tell them. Well, at least turn up to the cellar door and taste some wine.
For sure.
It's the least we can do. Thanks, Melissa. That was awesome.
Okay, thanks, Charlie.
Unreal. Oh.